After 6 months of genocidal war on the Gaza Strip amid targeting thousands of civilians, whether by bombing homes over their heads or by siege and preventing the entry of food and medical aid, or by direct targeting, Zionist Israel has so far claimed the lives of more than 37,000 Palestinian martyrs, nearly half of them children. The Palestinian Statistical Center announced that the number of children killed as a result of the Israeli entity genocidal war on Gaza has reached 14,000 children whose lives and dreams will never be fulfilled. Meanwhile, Zionist Israel continues to wipe out entire generations in Gaza, with its soldiers competing to kill the highest number of children, as we all have watched them boast about it on different social media platforms. According to the Palestinian Ministry of Health, a child is killed every 15 minutes in the Gaza Strip since the beginning of the war. This large number of casualties comes not only as a result of bombing and aggression, but also starvation, which ranks second in killing children in Gaza. This is due to the Israeli occupation's blockade on the Strip and the prevention of humanitarian food or medical aid from entering the Strip. So far, more than 20 children have been killed due to drought and malnutrition in Gaza. Meanwhile, the occupation warjets and artillery continue their airstrikes and intense shelling on various parts of the Gaza Strip, targeting homes and displaced gatherings, resulting in hundreds of martyrs and wounded. The Zionist occupation forces also persist in their aggression against the Al-Shifa medical complex and its surroundings in western Gaza for a third consecutive week, carrying out executions, arrests, torture, and forced displacement of residents. Experts estimate that the quantity of bombs and explosives dropped on the Gaza Strip since October 7th of last year equals the destructive power of several atomic bombs like those dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, with more than 2,800 massacres in less than 6 months. This leads us to the Zionist doctrine of power, violence, and suicidal deterrence. What cannot be achieved by force is achieved by more force. Through the use of brute force, collective punishment policies, and targeting civilians in their lives and livelihoods, Zionist Israel seeks to push Palestinians towards what resembles learned helplessness. The intention behind this is to divert the thinking of the people under occupation away from the idea of liberation from the occupation, towards completely dismissing the idea of resistance. However, Zionist Israel acknowledges that its success in shaping the awareness of Palestinians remains limited, despite its boasting about its ability to deter states and organizations. Why? Because we are the natives to the land and they are just illegal colonial settlers. Welcome to the Middle East Stream. I'm Marwa Osman. The Israeli entity genocide war against the Gaza Strip continues for its 6th month, characterized in recent days by the continued targeting of hospitals in general and specifically the Al-Shifa hospital, as well as the commission of further atrocities at various levels. Israeli occupation military operations have also been marked by intensified airstrikes on Rafah, hindering aid entry and displacing even more residents. To discuss this issue with us from Damascus is independent journalist and a very good friend of mine, Ms. Vanessa Beatty. Thanks a million for being with us. Vanessa, now 6 months into the genocidal Israeli occupation entity's war on the largest concentration camp on earth, which is known as the Gaza Strip, has Zionist Israel succeeded in achieving its aggressive objectives by settler crimes, Judaization, massacres, genocide, and ethnic cleansing?
No, absolutely not. In fact, the Zionist entity is losing on all fronts. In the northern occupied territories, as we know, an estimated 100,000 settlers and various Zionist businesses have been forced out of that territory and to relocate to the south. And it's admitted even by the Zionist entity that it's very unlikely that there will be enough security for them to return. We know that the entire resistance axis, including, of course, Yemen, has shut down the arterial shipping lane, and that now Eilat, the southern port in the occupied territories, is being targeted on a very regular basis. In Gaza itself, and even in the West Bank, the Zionist entity has met, what is effectively a besieged, starved, deprived resistance with relatively small capability, and yet they're unable to defeat them on the ground. They can only take power, let's say, by bombing women and children and schools and hospitals and summarily executing unarmed and defenseless civilians on an almost hourly basis. The Israeli economy is on its knees. The morale within the military is also decimated. And they're facing a united resistance axis that has never been seen before, actually. And so, in my opinion, despite the horrors that we're seeing, as I said, on an hourly basis, particularly in Gaza, but also in West Bank, the Zionist entity is losing this war, even on the propaganda front. Their entire edifice of lies and victimhood has been eradicated.
Mm-hmm. Well, Vanessa, the historic epic battle inscribed by the Palestinian resistance in the Battle of the Al-Aqsa Flood Operation on October 7 has been deemed as one of the most persistent lies so far in the Zionist propaganda machine by the supporters of this genocidal Israeli entity as the main reason, the Al-Aqsa Flood Operation being the main reason behind the calamity that has surpassed so far the 1948 Nakba, by the way, with numbers and statistics. Look, I myself am tired of repeating the history for the people who refuse to acknowledge the right of resistance, the right of return, the right to people to live in peace in their own land. I'm not going to talk about that anymore, but if I am tired, do you think that the people who are actively under genocide that we are watching in real time on TV and on our smartphones, do you think that they have, the Zionists have completely decimated the last shred of determination in the hearts and souls and minds of those people?
I think, if anything, what they've done is to strengthen the resolve. Of course, as I've said before, it's heartbreaking to see the images that are coming out of Gaza of starving children, of children that have been completely orphaned, eviscerated, lost legs, arms, limbs, etc. But if I speak to, for example, even the few friends of mine that I've managed to stay in contact with that are now in Rafah, there is no intention to leave Gaza despite the hardship that they're enduring. And in reality, what has the Zionist entity done? It's created an entire new generation of resistance, but not only among Palestinians, throughout the populations of the world. Because even those Arab states that have normalized relations with Israel, that have effectively tried to alleviate the pressure on Israel since the 7th of October, even in those countries, the populations are against their government's policy. Look at the protests that are now spreading across the Middle East, but across the entire world. So what the Zionist entity has actually done is to raise awareness in the world of the Palestinian issue, put it back on a world stage, and turn, you know, if you really want to be honest, we are all Hamas, we are all the resistance, because the Zionist entity is exposed for its sadistic, savage, brutal policy, not only in Palestine, regionally and globally.
Well, Vanessa, for 2 decades, we have seen the Zionist Israeli entity erecting the apartheid separation wall, which separates its colonies from the West Bank, for example, after seizing much of the West Bank's land, restricting the movement of the native inhabitants in the West Bank, and turning their lives practically into just a living hell. The International Criminal Court of Justice ruled that that wall is illegitimate and it should be removed. Nothing changed. It also ruled that basically on the verge of ruling that what's happening in Gaza is a genocide, and nothing happened. And the UNSC issued a resolution for a temporary ceasefire. Nothing again happened. What are the options left after all of this Zionist aggression and global disregard of what's going on in Palestine?
Well, I mean, I think, you know, we've seen to some degree a bit of a circus between the US and the Zionist entity. We've seen recently Netanyahu, hubris, really isolating the Zionist entity even more from its global supporters, from its support base. But despite all of that, of course, the US and the UK and the EU nations that are embedded with Israel for various reasons have still been supplying the weapons and the bombs and the armaments that are on a daily basis massacring Palestinian people and children. And the numbers that we're hearing, in my opinion, are way lower than they are in reality. We know that these organizations like the UN massage and manipulate numbers in order to serve the agenda of those that have actual control of them. You know, the international community, such as it is, whether it's the UN Security Council, the UNGA, the ICJ, are powerless because they're under the control of the West and of its Zionist Frankenstein. The only option now is for the resistance. And we're seeing already that Israel, in order to survive in the region, is expanding the war in the region. It's bombed Syria in the last 3-4 days, every single day, targeting Hezbollah positions, targeting development centers, etc. They want to and they need to expand the war in order to survive, because they're not going to survive as they are. And so now it becomes an issue of the resistance strategy to prevent the final solution, as the Zionists call it, in Gaza and in the West Bank.
Well, I share your sentiment to what's going on, and am very invested in how the world will react, if they will ever react, to any upcoming invasion of Rafah, and how the resistance will react, because that's what we are counting on right now. Thank you very much, independent journalist Vanessa Beeley from Damascus, for joining us to discuss this issue. Now, ladies and gents, stay with us, because we will next be talking about how the Palestinian people themselves are still actively supporting the resistance. A poll conducted by a leading Palestinian institute for opinion polling showed that more than half of Palestinians believe that Hamas should govern the Gaza Strip once the current war ends, while only 11% want Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas to manage the territory. More details in the following report. Over 50% of Palestinians, according to an opinion poll by a prominent Palestinian research institute, believe that Hamas should be in charge of the Gaza Strip after the current genocide ends. The Palestinian Center for Political and Survey Research, PCPSR, in Ramallah published the results last week in collaboration with the Konrad Adenauer Foundation, amid growing international concern over the increasing number of Palestinian civilian casualties as a result of the Israeli entity war against Gaza, now entering its 6th month. 59% of respondents in Gaza and the occupied West Bank said they wanted the Palestinian resistance Hamas to manage the Gaza Strip after the war. Only 13% of respondents hoped for the Palestinian Authority to return to control the sector, but under a different leadership than Mahmoud Abbas. The 88-year-old has seen a decline in popularity in recent years due to his failure to advance Palestinians' hopes of establishing a state and his reluctance to mend relations with the other Palestinian resistance factions, most notably Hamas. There have also been no substantive negotiations with the occupation for over a decade, where the Palestinian Authority is widely seen by its people as increasingly corrupt and autocratic. Simply because Abbas, who was elected for a 4-year term in 2005, has not yet appointed a successor and refuses to go to elections. According to the survey conducted between March 5 and 10, which included a sample of approximately 1,580 adult Palestinians in Gaza and the occupied West Bank, 70% of respondents said they were satisfied with the role of the Palestinian resistance faction Hamas played during the war. Additionally, 61% approved of the role played by Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar in Gaza. The survey also found that 71% of Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank believed that the Al-Aqsa flood operation on October 7th was a correct decision, representing only a 1% decrease according to a previous survey conducted by the organization and published in December. Furthermore, according to the survey, nearly 70% of Palestinians called for the dissolution of the Palestinian Authority. Additionally, 90% of Palestinians believe that President Mahmoud Abbas should resign. The survey also showed an increase in the percentage of support for armed resistance to confront the occupation, with more than 60% of Palestinians surveyed believing that resistance is the optimal way to end the occupation. The survey results indicate widespread frustration towards the international community, especially the United States of America and major European countries, and even the United Nations, which pressed for an immediate ceasefire for humanitarian reasons in Gaza, and yet Zionist Israel continues its genocide unabated. Now to discuss this issue with us from Perth is geopolitical commentator Ms. Maram Susli. Thanks a million for being with us, Maram, to discuss this issue. Now, an opinion poll, as you know, among Palestinians showed an increase in support of the Palestinian resistance Hamas in the Gaza Strip, which is facing ongoing Israeli anti genocidal aggression. How do you explain this to Western audiences who are completely brainwashed by Zionist propaganda with all this genocidal violence? Palestinians must have rejected Hamas by now, but the opinion polls say otherwise. How do you explain this to them?
Well, the purpose of Israel's assault on Gaza, number one, is to commit a genocide and push the Palestinians out. But the other is their hope to destroy the support base of the resistance by, like punishing the people of Palestine for the Operation Al-Aqsa flood. Mm-hmm. But it seems that this hasn't actually worked. And, in the West, they claim to support democracy, but when it comes to the opinion of Middle Easterners who voted in, for example, in Gaza, they voted in Hamas, mm-hmm. They don't sort of respect those opinions. So they really only respect opinions that the State Department of the United States says is acceptable. Mm-hmm. I would explain it this way. The fact of the matter is that the Palestinians have been suffering long before October 7th from the Israeli aggression, the terrorist actions of the Zionists. And of course, they're going to support the only people who, rather than dying on their knees, will stand up and fight on their feet. And in spite of, the genocide of the Israelis are committing, the resistance isn't being blamed for that by the people.
Mm-hmm. But Madam, the propaganda machine of the West keeps saying that it is basically the killing of 1,700 Israelis that triggered all of this. How do you respond?
Well, in 2023 alone, there was already 800 Palestinians that were killed, 400 in Gaza alone. In the West Bank, the Israelis shot a 2-year-old in the head just because he was part of the Tamimi family, which is a family that is very good at resistance. So, the notion that reality started in October 8th is really the notion that only Jewish lives matter and Palestinian lives are irrelevant. Mm-hmm. And of course, this has been going since even before 1948, when someone had the bright idea to create something called Israel. These terrorist attacks by the two terrorist groups that became the IDF, Ergon, Lehi, and Haganah, they were killing Palestinians even before Israel was created. Mm-hmm. So, of course, it didn't start in 1948.
Well, Madam, it was not a surprise for anyone who has been following Palestinian politics for the past 2 decades at least, that the poll showed an overwhelming rejection of Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas, with nearly 90% of those who took the poll said that he should resign. Yet, we see that the Biden administration, we see regional normalizing regimes, including the PA and Mahmoud Abbas, in every step of the so-called ongoing ceasefire negotiations. I mean, are they delusional, thinking that the PA can actually have any power inside of Gaza, or are we missing something here?
The fact that the PA even is playing along with the notion that they will take power in Gaza is an act of treason, in my opinion, and also probably in the opinion of many Palestinians who will outright reject this. The reason why the PA is no longer getting any support is because it's very clear that the two-state solution is dead, and that's their entire thing that they're based on, is pushing for peaceful resolution. But Netanyahu has made it clear over the last several decades that he has no intention of ever creating a Palestinian state, and the genocide in Gaza has only really stuck the final nail in the coffin of that delusion. Of course, the people are seeing that, and it's not only that the two-state solution is dead, But even the one-state solution is on its death knell at this point. It's clear from the genocide that that Zionism just has no place in our region, in the Levant, and it simply has to go.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, all the possible solutions that are being presented by the State Department, by the Secretary of State, by the Secretary of Defense, or what we call the War Minister in the US, or in other Arab normalizing regimes, is based on the fact that they don't want to see Hamas in Gaza anymore. Whose decision is it, Maram?
Well, it's really the decision of the people. And it's interesting when, the fact is that even in the West Bank, the opinion polls show that Hamas has become more popular than the PA. So perhaps Hamas should be governing the West Bank as well. So it just goes to show you that these people think that they can dictate to Palestinians what they should have. And when we talk about normalizing regimes, we're talking really about Saudi Arabia, because they were about to sign the Abraham Accords just before October 7th happened. And what's interesting is that even inside Saudi Arabia, a December 2023 poll showed that support for Hamas jumped by 30%. Mm-hmm. So it went up quite substantially after October 7th. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be a hard sell for Saudi Arabia, which is not a democracy in the first place.
Taken from what you are telling us, Maram, and according directly to the results of the survey conducted by the Palestinian Center for Political and Survey Research in Ramallah, they said that support for Hamas in the West Bank alone tripled compared to before the war. And that's just a survey that's done on a regional, on a national scale. If it's done on a regional scale for Arab world or for the Muslim world, but let us say with the Arab world, if it's done inside of the Arab world and we ask the same questions, it would be a sweeping result in favor, in support of Hamas. Where did the Western Zionist Israel go wrong here when it came to at least controlling the narrative?
That's actually very interesting. The poll I was talking about with Saudi Arabia was a Washington Institute poll. So it was conducted by the Americans, and that showed a 3 times jump in support for Hamas since October 7th. And I think that the reason is that, in the past when we've seen Hamas conduct attacks against Israelis, it's really been like superficial. They haven't really have been effective. But this time there was a real, they really showed themselves to be a resistance organization. And a lot of that is because of backing by Iran rather than Qatar. Qatar was trying to turn Hamas into sort of a PA where they just pay them off and in order for them to never fight the Israelis, who are constantly pretending under the table or in whispers that they might be talking of peace. But while they talk of peace, of course, they plan for war. And the people are not blind, they know what's up. And, the notion that the Americans think that they can subdue the Palestinians and their opinion by brute force and bombs is the miscalculation here. Because they thought if they could destroy and demolish Gaza, that it would turn the Palestinians and the region against Hamas. And that's just not what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Well, we still have 1 more minute, Maram, and I think that the upcoming stage is a very vital, important stage for the Palestinian cause, given that everyone who is really supporting Palestine is also under heavy blows and airstrikes by the Zionist entity. But it is the first time that we see this kind of a scale of support for Palestine. Do you think that this would change at least the minds of those who were against Syria, against Hezbollah, against Iraq, against Yemen for the past at least 11 years?
A lot of those people are kind of silent right now and sheepish. And I think that opinion polls have, inside the region at least, have become a lot more positive of the Houthis, of Iran. And this is a mask-off moment for those in the region that pretend to be supportive of the Palestinian cause, but are in fact doing nothing for them. For example, Erdogan's Turkey, Qatar as well, Saudi Arabia. These people are supposed to be the Islamic world, and yet they have shown themselves to be complete and utter gutless traitors. So in contrast to that, Iran, with the support of the resistance axis, is undoubtedly going to gain support. Unfortunately, in the West, you have the liberals who are in control of a lot of the pro-Palestinian groups who do want to push out like real resistance towards Israel, which is very interesting because it's almost like they are by design being controlled opposition. But even these voices are becoming more and more ostracized, with the reality on the ground being that the resistance is serious about fighting
and that's
Zionism.
what we count on, Maram, 100%, the people and the resistance on the ground, always and forever. And well, thank you very much, Maram Susli, for being with us, geopolitical commentator from Perth, to discuss these growing support for the resistance all across the region, not only in Palestine. Thank you very much for being with us. Ladies and gents, thank you for watching the Mideast stream right here on Press TV. Please do follow us on Telegram and on X, and we promise to give you the latest always from here, from West Asia, in support always for the resistance and the people, native people of the resistance. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you again next week. Assalamu alaikum.